Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings and welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and executive editor of ProduceBuzz.com. I'm joined once again by Teresa Nolan, the president and founder of Produce Buzz, along with Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, have you ever been disappointed with the fruits and vegetables you've bought at the grocery store? You know that's a rhetorical question. Of course you have. There's nothing more frustrating in the grocery shopping experience than finding some beautiful fresh produce on the shelf only to get it home and find that it is flavorless or the texture is just not right. Well, never fear. There are some very smart people in the field of horticulture working hard to solve that problem. And today we have one of those people with us on the podcast. Our guest today has been called the Willy Wonka of Veggies. This Cornell professor and plant expert creates new breeds of vegetables that offer exciting new flavors and other adaptations valuable to farmers and eager eaters alike, and all through natural breeding processes. Joining us today is Michael Mazourek, the Calvin Knoyes Keeney Associate Professor of Vegetable Breeding at Cornell University. Michael is a breeder of peas, beans, squash, cucumbers, and peppers, and has released numerous cultivars and breeding materials that are shared by small regional seed companies, as well as some of the world's largest seed companies. But Michael's work is broader than just improving flavor. His specialty is biochemical genetics in vegetables. In his work, he explores the diverse phytochemistry that plants use to repel pests and herbivores, reward and nourish pollinators and seed dispersers, and cope with environmental stresses, with a goal of harnessing to maximize nutrition and sustainability. And he is not just content in gaining that knowledge for himself. Michael is dedicated to passing what he is learning down to succeeding generations. That is why he is committed to serving in the academic community and sharing the craft of plant breeding with his students at Cornell and through grower conferences and field days. Michael was named one of the 50 people you will likely be talking about by Grist magazine in 2016. And he's here to tell us today about that work and also share with us some of his remarkable achievements, one of which was a new variety of squash that has taken the vegetable world by storm. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited to hear about your work and what you're doing. But before we get to that, I want to hear a little bit more about Michael. Tell us about yourself, your career. How did you get into this? How did you get interested in horticulture?
Sure. So I grew up, my dad and his brothers had a dairy farm and a mixed equipment farm. And so I grew up with farming in my backyard. I thought I was interested in studying biochemistry as my undergrad, I was interested in, so what are the drugs you can take when your health goes awry, and what are the pharmaceuticals we can take to get back on track? The more I learned about those, it turns out that there's no one dreaming up new compounds. There's chemicals we're find in nature and plants or microbes, and that's the source of a lot of compounds that are really affecting our quality of life, our health. So the minerals and vitamins for sure, but there's so many phytochemicals, a lot of the ones that are given your backdrop, all the colors and flavors and aromas, those are all active biochemicals the plants are making, not just to look great on your backdrop, but it's how they interact with the metabolism of organisms in their environment.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
was really excited and then ended up changing careers into finding myself in grad school studying hot peppers and the capsaicin to make them spicy in different ways and knocking it out and creating a new variety along the way, the habanada, no heat habanero.
Yeah.
And
Does that make you a Dr. Pepper?
I think that's trademark, but if I can get away with it, I'll take it.
Yeah. Right. So you're studying these peppers. Go on. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, and my advisor, Molly John, she was a plant breeder, and I was not really understanding what plant breeding was at the time. And so I had the opportunity to get a side project for my PhD where I said, well, I want to try this plant breeding stuff that you do. And it was fantastic. I realized I could create new vegetables, new breeds of plants where I could tailor them to exactly what I wanted or what farmers in my community were wishing they had. I can work with colors and shapes and sizes to make vegetables something that is just more enticing for people to happily integrate in their diets rather than it's like a chore and something you have to make sure to include on your plate. It's something people seek out. Um, and when the opportunity came to kind of continue her legacy at Cornell and a legacy that's gone on for quite a while, it was a great opportunity. And I've been trying to do my best to create new varieties that are exciting, study the science behind what makes them tick, and get them out and used in the community to benefit the consumers and that grower community that I have my roots in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so you begin to learn all of this. You could have gone into the corporate world with this knowledge, but you have chosen to stay primarily within the academic world. Perhaps you're doing other things beyond that. But tell us about that decision
Yeah.
to stay in the academic world.
Indeed, I do have a little bit of a hybrid position. What would you expect from a plant
That's great.
breeder? Yeah, so in academia, so I have in that role a really big responsibility, I think, as someone that is going to be continuing the efforts by this university in New York State to serve the needs of growers in our state that aren't being met by the seed companies that are just, doing a good job working at what they need to do for their business, and I can complement the areas where they're not working.
Got it. But you
Also,
focused on to do it there in your home state primarily. But I think I've seen some you're doing things outside of New York as well. I saw some of it. So
yeah, and part of that is thankfully there's a course correction, but when I was hired, I was the only squash breeder actively in the public system. Uh,
interesting.
and now I was for a while the only cucumber breeder. Now I'm, one of two. So I think, yeah, so my territory got pretty big as I tried to help serve growers that had unmet needs, and also be training others that want to learn the craft of plant breeding.
Yeah.
So that was yeah, I had a pretty broad territory. Luckily, some of my students and colleagues are moving into plant breeding positions in the private sector and public sector. So now there's a nice community that's forming. I'm way less alone. I think the squash world is in good hands in the public sector now,
That's
not just
great.
me.
It's very interesting that you focus on these specific vegetables. We can get to that a little bit, but I think that's really interesting. I generally I would think that you're in the horticulture field, you would cover a lot more than that. I suppose you do in your work. You probably cross over a lot of different areas, but That's that I found that interesting.
Well, yeah, I think that's the first time that someone said maybe work on more. The tagline of my graduate students in the beginning was squash, peppers, peas. Oh my! There's I work on quite a few more crops. Yeah, than
Yeah,
some.
right.
They all have some similarities, and I think your question about what might bring that together. Largely, it's the vegetables I grew up growing in my home garden. So as
Right.
long as I can remember, we had the family garden. They're the favorite things for me to grow, and I'm in this awesome position to be working on them as my career.
Yeah. And those vegetables, you could probably get all the nutrients and phytochemicals you need from just those, right? Or is that not true?
There's a lot of nutrients there. Peppers are amazing for vitamin C, all the eye health pigments, rich sources of folates, etc. I think there's all the macronutrients, the things we see listed on the label of some vitamins we might take. So all those macronutrients, but there's also just so much going on in plants where we still are discovering new compounds all the time.
Yeah.
And we don't really have a prescription of what it means to have like a great diet. And that's why there's people are searching for that. There's so much in the news and in the press and blogs that people are searching for, well, what should I be eating?
Yeah.
And is this good for me, bad for me? So I think there's a wealth of compounds in plants that trying to eat the rainbow, getting that breadth of plants in our diet is important. So we
Right.
work on a lot of them, but I think there's
Yeah.
expanding beyond that, I think is
Yeah,
uh,
and that was
key too.
that's as you said earlier, that was kind of what pushed you from the pharmaceutical world to the plant world is here's the real here's the real solution to a lot of our health problems. So that's good. You
Yeah.
also alluded to the discovery that's taking place now, and I'm sure
hmm
that is like in a lot of fields is just exploding exponentially. But what can you tell us about the history of plant genetics? I'm thinking, of course, of Gregor Mendel. I don't know. I have a lot of the history of that, but his work and other. But there are others that helped pioneer, and it seems like now you're doing the work of Gregor Mendel at a maybe a much larger scale. So, what can you tell us about that history?
Yeah, so Gregor Mendel, he has one gene he studied in peas that he never wrote about in his papers that it never really cooperated. So that's still one of the targets I hope to characterize
Oh,
and really learn.
really?
So he's got some unfinished business for sure.
That's
Yeah,
interesting. I didn't know. I
in the
figured they
genes
would.
that
Yeah.
can make peas like snap peas, snow peas have pigmented pods. So I have some varieties of flat snap peas, we call them, that have purple, red pods from anthocyanin compounds, like the
Wow.
berries behind you.
Yep.
And Gregor Mendel never really published on that last gene because it doesn't behave according to Mendelian genetics truly. So he left that part out.
Wow. So there's still something to be discovered that he was trying to discover. That's amazing.
Yep,
Yeah.
his unpublished study. Yep.
Are there any
But
other pioneers in the field that you might enlighten us up on? Not to dig
yeah,
too deep into it, but
so I think if you go all the way back, there's like the first hunter-gatherers that are transitioning to agriculture that first domesticated a lot of the plants we grow.
right.
So those intrepid souls that were moving into new areas, tasting what was growing there, and finding out what was poisonous or not.
Oh yeah.
So that was, a huge thing. More recently, so there was some waves where, Gregor Mendel was really studying hybrids and combining abilities. Later on, we discovered DNA and genes, and that guided how we explore. Um, there's statisticians came into it, and there's a lot of the how we can really breed crops for the traits that growers really care about and impact yields or pocketbooks at the end of the day.
Yeah.
All of that, there's some statisticians that came on and they have this really involved, intricate math to study what's the best ways forward.
Yeah.
Um, but there's been some big heroes along the way. So names like Luther Burbank, so like russet
Oh
Burbank
yeah.
potatoes.
Yeah.
He worked on a lot of crops.
Right.
My predecessor's predecessor here at Cornell, Henry Munger. So most of the vegetables in the produce department of a grocery store, I imagine, involve some big revolution he did in some way.
Interesting.
All carrots are hybrids. Well, many. And so that traces back to a discovery he made on a way to make hybrid carrot production. Most cucumbers, if anyone has purchased or grown a market more cucumber, that traces back to Cornell melons, onions, celery, and tons. So there was this great generation around his time of these great generalist vegetable breeders, plant breeders, working in a lot of ways. And there's the Green Revolution crops and the dwarfing that Norman Borlaug did and the grains. So there's this great wave of those. And now, yeah, I think we're at a fun time when we can look to see if we have the chance to go back. Like if we know what we know now, is there anything that those folks would have done different? And it turns out there's a lot of flavor that's missing. So a lot of the drive. And so you see a lot of people doing these heirloom restoration projects where they try to go back and capture some of the things they missed in the process. It's the advantage of knowing where we know now. They would have done it at the time if they could.
Yeah, interesting.
Excuse me, what's the difference between hybrids and GMOs?
So there's some of the spectrums of how innovation works along there. You have one approach, and in plant breeding, it is creating new cultivars where we're essentially working with the whole genome of the plant. There's tens of thousands of genes in the plant. We're discovering more all the time. So in plant breeding, we're really harnessing evolution. And so we can be driving forward these populations to be more fit for different environments, be toward the directions we want. And it's a lot of cross-pollination and selection, and some of it is out in the dirt, looking to see which plant is performing the best. Some of it gets really CSI, so we'll bring in all the latest technologies, genome sequencing, mass spectrometry to characterize all the metabolites and compounds in the plant, and different spectroscopy techniques. It can be very high tech, increasingly using a lot of computer models, machine learning to guide us.
Wow.
But it's all harnessing the complexity and the power of evolution. Right.
Right.
So hybrids, fit into that somewhere. I can unpack that if you want to keep talking about that. In the transgenic or the GMO world, it's rather than working with the whole system as a network, it's much more the approach of looking for the magic genes. What are the simple components that we can change a component? It's it tends to be a good system if you want to put in a lone actor gene. So something where all it has to do is make a protein and that protein just exists in solitary. So the most common example of that would be like BT corn, or increasingly you see uh, fluorescent proteins and goldfish at the pet shops, and there's glow in the dark petunias. So they're not really changing how the organism works and interacts with this environment, its yield or anything, but they just have a protein that's made. It's also really easy to remove something to make a gene non-functional that way. But you're typically just changing a couple components, whereas what I'm doing is harnessing evolution to work with the whole network of all the genes and how they work together. I didn't really appreciate the power of that when I first started in plant breeding, because I can work with all the things I don't yet know how they work, but I can still make plants that are delicious and then go back and study, okay, what did we change? What are the genes for that? And the science is still very cool for me.
You hit on one of the questions I had about this breeding as just trial and error, but it's a bit of both, I guess, trial and error and high tech. So
Whenever anyone is doing science, you have to do some trial and error because you're discovering new things. So science is always, we have hypotheses and find out if they're true or not. It's always trial and error. I
yeah.
think what plant breeding does is it lets us work with the sum total of all those genes in the plant. So I can look at the phenotype in the field, and really that's the sum total of everything and how it performs in different environments. Whereas if you want to do the single targeted gene approach, first you need to find the genes, study the genes, and then you can move forward with tweaking that one gene. All of the work I do, all the vegetable varieties I create are through conventional plant breeding. So it's cross-pollination, selection. It's an ancient craft humans have done for millennia. We are doing it with more insight and more efficiently, but it is all just working with natural cross-pollination, not with other recombinant DNA approaches.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Perfect. One thing when I worked with the strawberry growers, their breeders always talked about how many chromosomes that strawberries had, so how many various outcomes you could get. And
For
that
sure.
has to be play into your work all the time.
It does. No, and it's I think it's a balance between um there is this serendipity of discovery that's always exciting, but we also are getting better and better at predicting and guiding and which cross-pollinations and what tools we have to search for that outcome we thought was in there. We can do it more efficiently all the time, but it's still, yeah, it's a numbers game. You need to buy a lot of tickets to win the lottery.
How do you foresee AI playing into your job? And I mean, we're hearing so much about how it's going to change everything.
Good question.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So there's different levels of AI. So the one, and getting back to Cynthia's question about like the GMOs. So one of the things that AI is approaching is, if you've seen the movie Jurassic Park, now there's a company, Colossal Biosciences, is working on de-extincting organisms. So a lot of that uses a lot of machine learning to discover patterns and to be able to kind of fill in the blanks. So now, rather than just if someone wanted to move a gene from discover something and move them, there's now programs where you can describe the type of protein you'd want to be made, and it will come up with candidate sequences that you can produce that might do that function. So that's one bit of what's going on. In my world in plant breeding, what we do a lot of is it would be really advantageous to know which plants we should cross together. So you can look to see, evaluate them as they are, but what would their progeny be if we cross this plant with that plant? How do we predict that? So we have some machine learning approaches where we'll sequence plants' genome and use it to guide us as to which plants would have the best progeny. So it's moving in increasingly. I do a lot of work by looking at plants, measuring plants, tasting plants. Whenever I can have something to help me do that job to expand what I'm seeing, that's great. So increasingly, we have drones flying over our fields, hyperspectral imaging. When we have models where the computer is really helping guide us what's going on.
But you have to, I mean, AI can't taste that vegetable, but you could have a bunch of people taste. Good point. All right. Yeah.
But
that somehow the AI has to get that data input into the systems. That's my point.
Oh, for sure. No, and I think in my breeding program, so just kind of an idea what it looks like. So we will put out probably 10,000 different plants a year in all the crops, where it's all different iterations, where every plant in the field could be a little different than all the others. We will go through, we look for which plants are the highest yielding, which are early, which have the right architecture so the harvesters can reach in and pick off the fruit,
Wow.
which would be aesthetically pleasing. And then for most of it, we taste it. It's it's the steps that are the hardest are the actual tasting, because it's very easy to walk through a field and say, okay, which bell peppers are a nice cubic 4-lobe shape? it's a lot more taxing to be able to bite into a couple from every plant and decide which ones you like. And then, well, I guess you hope my taste buds
And
match yours.
it can vary on the same plant, I would imagine too, the
And
taste.
the time of day. So
Yeah.
when we were
Oh,
breeding the habanada, that no heat habanero, I would go through the field in the morning as the plants are cold and warming up, and then later I try to go backwards through the patch I had just done, to sample them again in a different order. And as they get warmer, they're more aromatic. If you pick your cucumbers soon after dawn, they're the crispest. During the day, as the plant's transpiring, losing water, they will be less crisp. So
interesting.
yeah,
Very, a
the
lot of
flavor part is
factors,
tricky.
so many factors to consider. That is blows my mind. Rick, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if plants can be modified to have more probiotics, um, prebiotics, in the way they affect your body. Yeah.
Yeah, so the probiotic question, prebiotic, is really interesting. So for some of that, there are some ideas, but the whole field is really in its infancy, I think, and being able to predict which ones and to generalize, because I'm sure for each of us here, well, those of you that are siblings will tend to be related in the type and how your metabolism works and what you might need in your diets. But as you and I are unrelated, we might have some pretty different needs and some different microbes that really do better for us. So it's it's a hard question to say, how to make ones that are better. We can't even really agree, is coffee saving our lives or killing us? It's in the news each day. It changes back and forth. It's a
Right.
hard, it's hard to frame. But what we do know is, there are some of the compounds from plants and just some of the what we call now the intrinsic benefits of eating plants that are just going to really good for our digestion. So we always try to break it down to the components. Maybe we'll get there, but eating fresh fruits and vegetables, we know there's benefits in how we feel, and so that's a lot of it has to be coming from that gut microbiome. There are some different fibers and sugars we know that will digest them less and they'll be more available for the microbes in our gut. And there's just so much yet to be figured out because, this is what I was really interested in plants, because you have different plants that interact with their own microbiome in the soil and beyond, where they, under different stress conditions, they set up different relationships and organisms in their soil. So the common ones that people probably know about are legumes, so that they will nodulate and fix nitrogen, have the symbiotic relationship with the microbes in the soil. The plants providing those bacteria with some energy, and those microbes are providing the plants with some nitrogen that wouldn't be available otherwise. If you have a scenario where the plant has abundant nutrition, has everything it needs, it might not be forming those relationships with um, with those organisms. So it's a complex thing in how do plants communicate and decide when anthropomorphize them, but to what have they evolved as the triggers for when they will have those interactions, which plants can do that, and then what are the environmental settings why that will trigger that to happen? Doesn't happen all the time. So I think your question is fascinating, and I think we're decades away from being able to be prescriptive about that.
That's
Is
fascinating.
the same thing true with protein? Can you breed the plant to have more protein?
You can. There's a famous experiment people were doing for decades and are still doing on corn, where they're selecting corn every generation have more and more and more protein. So they're approaching probably the physiological limit. So you have a high protein and a high oil. Well, the oil levels are getting really high. There's limits. If you look at a banana is only ever going to have so much protein because it has some limits. If you look at beans, they can continue to have more and more protein because they can fix nitrogen, so they can be, things that are a great source of protein and amino acids will be that way. But then you also have issues of protein quality and how those amino acids are digested, what that means for the composition. And there's also non-protein amino acids that are also in plants that also can have health benefits. So in breeding, if I can find plants that contrast for what you're looking for, or they vary, there's some diversity in what you're looking for, and I have the means to select for it, we can take evolution and really push it to make the plants very different after a few generations.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Maybe a bit scary. I don't know, but no, it's well. This is really interesting. I want to. So it's interesting to me that you have beans and squash, which are two of the three sisters, but you didn't get into corn.
Yeah. So all the vegetables I work on, beyond just the things that's growing in the home garden, they they all have some similar needs and a similar breeding approach.
Okay.
So I can
Corn
have
is quite different, I take it.
yeah. So you need completely different infrastructure and equipment. So I have a lot of hand harvest crops, largely hand harvest, and they're all things that I can cross, self-pollinate if I want more of them, and they fit a similar approach, and so it just kind of makes sense operationally for me to have that set.
We grew up in the apple business, and when I was growing up in it, I didn't know a lot about the genetics, but we've talked to some apple farmers since then, and one thing that I learned is that of course, the seeds from an apple most likely won't produce the same variety, and they have to kind of accidentally discover these. But it's amazing to me, that thing, and of course they're creating these new varieties, and then they make them proprietary and sell them. But anyway, but let's how does peas, beans, squash, cucumbers, and peppers, do you have this? Can you, if you take a seed from any of those and plant it, will it be the same variety?
Depends on the variety. So there are some varieties that are what we call pure lines. So it'd be they're all very uniform, and one seed from any plant, as long as it didn't have any neighbors that were cross-pollinating. I always get the diagnoses of someone that's growing zucchini and acorn squash side by side and save seeds in the next generation. The bees have made some crazy hybrids for them. So there's also hybrid vegetables where it'll be like corn or your apple trees, where they'll be very different the next generation. Or I mean, maybe to an aficionado, they're surely different. To the average person, it depends on kind of what you're looking for, probably.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the veggies that you have created. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
because he says some really interesting. Tell us about some of those. And
so the one that I think a lot of people know me for is honey nut squash. So I really did the victory lap on that. That was work being done at Cornell that was just way ahead of its time. Dick Robinson, Molly John, and then myself to finally finish it. Then the big thing is getting it out into the world. But that little miniature butternut squash at first, it's too small. Everybody wanted larger squashes because, all these little vegetables were impractical. Now we recognize a lot of small fruits and vegetables is really convenient. It helps us have healthy snacking and less food waste. You can cook conveniently. So that was a tremendous outcome. Pretty much probably the little butternut squashes you see trace their roots back to me or my predecessors at Cornell. my PhD project, we had a pepper that wasn't hot. It was in the Capsicum chinensis, so the habanero family. So that was that first project I did with my advisor, Molly Johns, where we wanted to see what would happen if we selected a habanero to be not hot? What could it taste like? Could we remove the heat? I love eating habaneros. They don't love me back. So that was my own motivation. But we work on, in the fun vegetable realm, we work on small striped snacking peppers where we can really explore the diversity of pepper flavors. There's a lot more than you find in bell peppers out there.
Yeah.
We worked on colorful potted peas, edible potted peas, Beauregard, cardinal purple, and red to really add to the mix of color. Things that would hopefully get my kids really excited about eating their veggies out of the
Yeah.
garden.
Yeah.
We also work on making vegetables that will survive different diseases. So, to have a good tasting vegetable, first you have to have a plant that survives and produces that fruit. So, one of the big pushes we've done is working on downy mildew resistance in cucumbers. So, on the East Coast, if you're growing cucumbers in your garden commercially or looking to buy them at some point in the season, they will have this mosaic quilted look appearance on their leaves with yellow and brown squares, and then die quickly if you're not in an intensive fungicide program.
Hmm.
So one of the things we're the most excited about right now is the resistance to that disease that we're being able to really spread around and get that in a lot of growers' hands, and makes them more profitable because they're not needing to buy the fungicides, and the growers, the consumers, just have such great access to more local produce that can be grown, especially for those that are looking for organic produce. It's a huge win.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah. The honey nut squash,
Mhm.
it's about the size of an acorn squash, isn't it? And can you just cut it in half and cook it in the oven, or do you have to cut the peel off of it?
So my favorite way to cook it is I just cut it in half lengthwise, remove the seeds, put it in the oven. If you cover it for the first bit until it really gets hot, that's a great way to really steam it, cook it, get up to temperature. But then I think it really shines if you are roasting it like at 400, and then at the end, if you take the foil off, take the lid off. I like to wipe it down with some butter, but then you just really let it more roast at the end. And then that really develops the flavor. The caramelization kicks in, and it just really, you get the awesome flavor from it. But most ways you cook it, it's good. So cooking it with the skin on works totally fine. There are people that like to eat the skin on them. I think that's something that is a nice protective barrier between the squash and the environment, and I'll leave that to the compost man.
Yeah, great. I went to a little local market here. I couldn't find them in the bigger chain stores, but I went to a little local market here, and they had your honey nut squash there. And I bought one last night, but I was away at a meeting, so I couldn't prepare it. I was hoping I could prepare it before we had this. But tell us. I think for the others, I've read a bit about it. How does it compare to the butternut squash?
Well, it is has a different flavor. In
Sweeter,
part,
right? I read that it's sweeter.
it's sweeter. Everything is more concentrated. So there's a lot of water weight, basically, in a lot of other butternut squash.
Okay.
The other big benefit from it is that it is it was crossed with a buttercup squash back in the day, so those tend to be a lot more of like the sweet potato, the baked potato kind of texture, so that helps concentrate the flavor.
Okay.
So I think that's the main thing is just that concentrated flavor.
Got it.
So when you roast it, you get more beta carotene per bite that way. And then, and if you want to take more bites, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. The flesh looks darker. I guess
Hmm.
that's more beta carotene, and it's not as hard to cut as a butternut squash either. Is it? Is it a little lighter skinned?
It's probably a little thinner, lighter skin. But I think that's one of the things we've worked to improve on our subsequent generations.
Yeah,
The original honey nut squash was really it's kind of like an heirloom. So
okay,
it has a great flavor. It takes some skill to grow it and get the most out of it.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
the it doesn't store as long. So some of
Oh,
our more recent varieties, where we've selected it to have better storage among some other attributes. And so what that really does is it helps, so if you store it and sometimes it'll get that kind of a withered appearance or soft, you cut open, it's kind of stringy on the inside. We can help avoid that and help it lasts a lot longer in storage and help growers, be able to get,
right.
sell more good produce and more dinners to more people.
Yeah. Rick, you have a question.
On the honey nut squash, have you tried roasting the seeds?
Yes, the seeds are delicious. So we have there's a company up in Geneva, Geneva, New York. So Stony Brook Wholehearted Foods, they have a line of snacks that include roasted butternut squash seeds, and they are delicious.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the
I was
honey.
wondering when you said you get rid of the seeds, if it's worth the trouble with the honey nut to save the seeds and roast them.
Well, it's a small squash. It has fewer seeds. They're small seeds, like all butternuts, but they are really tasty.
Hmm.
Great. You mentioned heirlooms several times.
Mhm.
So I'd like to, what do you think about, what are your thoughts on heirloom varieties? Have you done any work preserving those as well?
Oh, for sure. I think if, heirlooms, it's like anything that you have an heirloom in your family,
Uh,
you're saving it because it's precious to you,
right.
and that has tremendous value. The heirloom vegetables are often, it's a great way for us to connect to things that are important in our roots. They often have some fantastic flavors when we weren't shipping produce around the country. And so you have more kitchen garden fresh um, vegetables. The the other thing is they were selected at a time when before the kind of some of the modern agriculture that Cynthia was talking about. And so if you want to work on organic agriculture and have plants that are more able to be adapted to the environment, function naturally without all the inputs, they can be a great source of those characteristics as well. But, much like with sports cars, the muscle cars are great, but the resto mods having disc brakes on that classic car look is awesome too.
Right.
There's ways, the heirlooms are like a frozen time capsule of how that variety was.
Yeah.
The person that had it, they didn't just appear on the planet as like
Right.
that heirloom crop. They were something that people select and over time changed.
Right.
So I think the going back in time, the people would be surprised that we never bothered to update to improve what they were doing. They were improving it. So as we have new diseases, new pests, I think it's important to continue to move those heirlooms so they can be grown well in their modern environment. Don't lose
Yeah.
what makes them special and celebrate it.
Right.
Mhm.
Rick.
I have a question on the heirloom varieties. Have you ever heard of, we grew up in the mountains in North Carolina, and there's a bean called a greasy cut short bean or a greasy back bean.
I have.
Okay.
There are some great people working on preserving those in those different coves of North Carolina, I think you call those areas.
Yep.
Hmm.
Hollers.
The
Hollers,
hollers
another
and the
word.
coves. Yeah. Asheville is coves.
Yeah.
So I was like, what are you doing? Why are you calling it coves? There's no water here. I'm looking around. That was naive my first time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's a great example of of some beans with some great flavor. And I've read about some of the classic ways to preserve them. So there's this leather britches. I don't know if you're
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with that approach, where you can hang them and dry your green beans and then concentrate the flavor. So I'm very interested in, if I want to innovate in flavor, I need to both be able to create something that's different and know how people could prepare it. How are they cooking with it? How could they cook with it? How were they cooking with it? I think all those ways are great avenues to getting really exciting flavor, and maybe probably some enhanced nutrition out of our vegetables, like all the ways that people used to ferment vegetables to store them. We've moved away from that. There's fascinating work into Rick's question on microbiomes. And I mean, so what really is behind that? Is there some secrets to why that was so good and nourishing for us to use those methods to preserve our produce, our harvests?
Yeah. Teresa.
I remember when you cooked those, the grease would literally float to the top. I think it was from the beans.
That was
It's
your
like
fat back
oil.
you had in there.
A lot of oil in there, but maybe I'm wrong because maybe they did use fat back.
Well, they look greasy on the outside, as I remember. I haven't seen it in years. They
Yeah.
kind of have a greasy look. Is that actually oil?
I think the difference from one bean to another is whether they have that little peach fuzz on them or not.
Oh,
So I believe it's whether they're smooth and shiny, like you said, greasy, or a little bit fuzzier. But
right. Got it.
with that are the different flavors, properties that go with that.
Yeah.
Very likely.
Right. Teresa has a question, I think.
With the honey nut squash, how are you? I guess the university holds the patent on that or whatever, and you're getting growers to grow it. You're licensing people to grow it, and will it grow just about anywhere?
Yeah. So me personally, I don't patent any other vegetables. I think that's,
Uh-huh.
as I mentioned before, it's an issue. So
Yeah.
we find good partners. We work with them, and yeah, we license the seeds. And when people are making a profit off those, we ask them to share a portion of the proceeds back to help fuel our next invention, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The vegetables I work with tend to be broadly adapted. In some cases, they'll do well many places. We found with the honey nut, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, it can be the wrong environment to really get a good crop. And if you're in the Southwest, it comes out a little different. So in general, a lot of, I breed for the things that people need around me here in New York. If it works well in other states, other countries, fantastic.
So
Mhm.
can you buy the seed through some of the seed companies if you wanted to try it in your garden?
Oh, for sure. I think you can get honey nut squash in most seed companies now. Ones that are serving some larger growers and the ones that you'll get some catalogs in the mail.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. That's great.
This has been fantastic. Very informative, interesting. I could go on, but I know we've got time. Oh, Teresa, go ahead.
Well, we
Yeah.
didn't get to hear about his cucumbers.
Oh.
But
Okay, before we
maybe
get
we
to
could have
that,
another show
but-
on that.
Yeah, before we get to that, is a cucumber a fruit or a vegetable? You keep calling it a vegetable, Michael.
It is it depends what world you're talking in. If you're
Right.
talking in botany, it's one thing. If you're talking in the grocery store, it's another.
Yep, that's right. I like that.
I heard what knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right. That's right. Love it. Oh, fantastic. Okay, what were you going to ask? You had a question, or did you answer it already? I forgot.
Well,
You were-
I didn't know whether he had anything he wanted to tell us about his
Oh, there's
cucumber
cucumbers,
varieties. Yeah.
Yeah.
about peppers
So-
and squash.
Yeah, so with cucumbers, the thing that we're most excited with cucumbers now is there are, pickling cucumbers, but they can do more than just make pickles. So they have a really thin skin. You don't need to peel them. You can pick them if you want. They tend to taste a little bit better. Some people have written about how they are, um, they have more flavor because when they're lacto fermented or fermented, this actually they have more nutrition for the microbes, to get back to Rick's questions.
Interesting.
And they're just like the perfect snack, or the fit in my shirt pocket, or if you slice them, they're already the size of the bread. So we've been really working on promoting pickling cucumbers as snacking cucumbers.
Yeah.
They are delicious. They last a little bit better than the ones that have to be shrink wrapped in the grocery store. And from a grower perspective, they yield more. So it's really win-win-win. And so we've been making those not just to be like prolific and tasty and to go well in my sandwiches. We've been working to have them, resist some of these latest diseases that are really impacting a lot of growers. And so we are very glad we have a USDA grant that, for someone like me in the science world, helps me go from having this packet of seed I'm really proud of to actually getting it out into the world as a cultivar, and really the final push. One of the hardest things is when you create a new variety of vegetable. You're often asking people to distinguish it in the marketplace. Sometimes it means it needs its own SKU on the shelf. The huge hurdle of getting something known by name out in the world. So honey nut is one of those breakthroughs where it's not just thrown in the bin of butternuts where people can't discover that it's really good. We want to try to get all our vegetables into more of the world like apples, where they all not only are apples, but they all get their own name tag. And so when people know what they want to do with it or what their flavor preferences are, they can go find that flavor experience we want. And so for all my veggies, that's kind of our biggest challenge, biggest reward when it works, is getting them known by name so people can ask for them by name.
Yeah.
Are you getting them out now? Are they getting widely dispersed in the stores?
We are just doing our first test pilot runs with growers. We have some growers in the southeast where it's more challenging to grow the veggies because it's summer all year long, but it's summer for the people, it's summer for the crops, it's summer for all the pests and challenges of those crops. So we have these cucumbers poised with some different grower partners that are helping us decide which is the finalist, which will be the cucumber that makes it out in the world. And I hope they will be officially out there and in grocery stores and everywhere broadly in another year or two.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep you here all day, but I think I need to let you go because you're a busy man. We want some more flavorful vegetables, so we want you to get back to your job. But there's a ritual we make all our guests go through here when they're on the show. And I didn't tell you about it before because
No, you did not.
I didn't want to scare you off. I had a little trouble booking you, but you came around. But if I told you this, I know it wouldn't have got you. So this ritual, it's painful, Michael. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's painful. Here's the deal. Teresa loves puns.
Mhm.
And she brings a pun to every episode. And we punish our guests and our listeners with these puns. So here's how it works. Usually the pun is in the form of a question. And she asks the question, and we try to guess the punny answer.
Right.
And then if we don't get it, she tells us. But we call this segment Home Grown. So it's painful. These puns are painful. You can't laugh at them. That's the rule. You can't laugh. You got to groan.
Okay.
But anyway, so you're up for it?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, Teresa, what is our homegrown for today?
Well, you see, the farmer and his wife decided they needed some new equipment, and the county fair was coming, and they had a big equipment exhibit there with representatives selling the equipment. So they decided they'd go over to the fair, but when they first got there, they kind of split up because she had developed or made this wonderful, sweet, wonderful blueberry pie that she wanted to enter in the pie competition. And he had a cow that he was entering in the competition. So they split up and they agreed to meet at the equipment area. So when he got there, he realized he had left his cell phone in the truck and he didn't want to go back to the truck. So he thought, I hope she's here. I'm going to see if I can find her. And how do you think he found her?
Okay, so let me see if I can summarize this. The farmer and his wife needed new equipment. They're going to go to the county fair. They're going to look at the equipment exhibit. He's got a cow he wants to enter. She's got a blueberry pie. He's going to enter into the contest, but they get separated. He left a cell phone. He needs to find her. How did he find her? So I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a pretty drawn out story. Usually her puns are a little bit shorter setup. What do you think, Rick? How did he find her?
Oh, boy.
Oh man. I don't know. Got any ideas,
No.
Michael? No. Okay, you have to tell us.
Well, he was at the equipment exhibit, so he tracked her down.
Oh. See, Michael, if I'd have told you about this, you definitely would have said, no, I'm too busy.
I thought for sure it was going to be something to do with genetics on that side of the equation.
I kept thinking of cowbells. And call him on the cowbell phone. Anyway, that was bad.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Sorry. I hope he'll still speak to us after this.
Yeah, maybe not. Anyway. Well, Michael, thank you again. It's such a pleasure to have you. I hope we can have you back because there are some other questions we'd like to dig in on this. So at some point in the future, I might hit you up again to see if you can
dig in deep.
Okay, Michael. Wish you all the best. All the best of luck. And we're going to be looking for some new veggies from you soon.
There we go. Let's do it.
Okay. So, okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page, and check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.